Summary completion is one of the trickiest tasks in the IELTS reading test. That's because there are two versions of the task. One where you choose words from the text, and the other is where you choose words from a list. You could get either on test day, so it's best to be prepared. To get a high score in this task, it's important to use the E2 method to help guide you to the correct answers. Before we dive into the method, let's do a quick overview of what summary completion looks like. In summary completion, there will be a long, complex text which the summary will be based on. You'll need to skim read this long text to find the right section that the summary corresponds to. This example is just a small section from a longer text. Here are the instructions. The instructions are important to pay attention to because they tell you how many words you can use, where the words come from, and where your answers need to go. Always pay attention to what the instructions say about the word limit. If you write more than the word limit, you will lose a mark. And here is what the summary looks like. It usually consists of 1 or 2 paragraphs. In this question type, the summary will be a paraphrase version of one part of the text, not the entire text. The answers may not come in the same order as the text, but they will come from one section or area of the text. The summary will include numbered blanks where your answers go. You'll need to figure out the correct word or phrase that fits into each numbered blank. And, as I mentioned before, there are 2 versions of summary completion. In the first version, you need to select words directly from the text which fits into the gaps, like this example. And here is an example of the other version of the task, where you must choose words from a list to fill the gaps instead. The words or phrases from the list will be identified by letters, for example, A, B, C, and so on. In either task type, whether you choose words from the text or from a list, you must use the word or phrase exactly how it's written, without changing its form. Otherwise, you'll lose a mark. Now it's time to learn the E2 method for summary completion. In step 1, you need to check the instructions. This is important because, as I mentioned earlier, the instructions can vary. For example, you may be asked to choose 1 word from the text, choose 2 words from the text, or choose 2 words and/or a number. The instructions tell you exactly where you need to take the words or phrases from and where they need to go. In step 2, you need to read the summary and highlight keywords. The keywords will help us when we're searching through the text to locate our answers. In step 3, you need to scan the text for the relevant section. This means you need to look for the correct part of the text that corresponds to or refers to the summary that you're completing. Step 4 is read carefully. Once you've found the relevant section of the text, you need to read it carefully for meaning to finally lead you to step 5, which is to choose your answer. Here's our summary completion task. It's titled, Project to Reintroduce White Storks at Knepp Estate. Let's apply the method together now. Do you remember the first step in our E2 method? That's right, check instructions. Remember to read them carefully because they contain valuable information about how many words or numbers you can use, where to take them from, and where your answers need to go. The instructions tell us, questions 1 to 4, complete the summary below. Choose 1 word only from the text in each gap. This means that you can only write 1 word, which must come from the text, and once we've selected our answer, it needs to go in the gap. Remember to pay close attention to the instructions. In this task, the answers must come from the text, so we cannot change the word form. In step 2, we need to read the summary and highlight keywords. What could the keywords be? First, let's read the sentences. Last spring, 2 white storks were observed nesting at Knepp Estate, putting blank together high up in a large oak tree. Okay, in this sentence, the word storks, the verb nesting, and the location Knepp Estate seem important. I'll also highlight what goes around the blanks, putting blank together. Oak tree also seems like an important detail that will lead us to the correct answer because it's where the storks are putting something together. Great! Let's keep reading. The female laid 3 eggs, which unfortunately proved to be blank. Okay, in this sentence, I'll highlight female because it seems like a specific clue, 3 eggs because it's a specific number of something, and provided to be because it comes right before the blank. Great work so far. Let's read more of the summary. However, this was not surprising for such young storks. Naturalists believe they are likely to breed successfully in the future. Now, since there's no numbered blanks associated with these two sentences, I don't have to worry too much about the keywords because we know that the answers can sometimes come out of order. So these sentences might not necessarily help us out, but it's great to scan them anyways. Let's find the keywords now for the next sentence. These 2 storks were bred in blank, and after arriving in the UK, were kept for several years together with a few fully mature storks and some fellow juveniles before being released at NEP. Here, I've highlighted 2 storks because it's a specific number, bred in as it comes before the numbered blank, UK because it's a specific place, several years because it tells us about how long the storks were kept together, and mature and juveniles because they specifically describe other storks. And here's the final part of the summary. It appears that other storks are developing a sense of blank to their new home. One left NEP for a year only to fly back to be with the group again. Here, I've highlighted other storks, developing, and new home because they all seem to be important clues that will lead us to the correct answer. In the final sentence, I've highlighted one left, fly back, and group to describe the behavior of one of the storks. Well done. Here's the summary with the keywords highlighted. The next step in our method is to scan the text for the relevant section. Here's a top tip. To find the correct section of the text, look for synonyms or paraphrase versions of those keywords that we highlighted. The words in the text won't always be the same as they are in the summary. In step 3 of our method, we need to scan the text for the relevant section by using the keywords that we highlighted. The main text that you're scanning in this task will generally be a long, complex text made up of multiple paragraphs. As you can see, this text is titled White Storks Back in Britain After Hundreds of Years, and it spans across many paragraphs. We'll give you 3 seconds for each section of the text to pause and scan. Scan it now using our keywords from before and see if you can figure out the part that corresponds to our summary completion task. Great job! Hopefully you identified the correct part of the text, section B, using the keywords to help you. Now we're ready to tackle step 4 of our method, which is to slow down and read carefully. In this next step, it's important that you read carefully for those keywords that you found in the summary. Here, you'll really need to rely on your knowledge of synonyms and paraphrase versions of those keywords. Let's focus on this beginning part of the text. As we read the first part, see if you can spot the keywords from the first numbered blank sentence. We're looking for storks, nesting, NEP estate, putting blank together, and oak tree. So, after such a long absence, there was great excitement when in April of this year, a pair of white storks built an untidy nest of sticks in the top branches of a huge oak in the middle of our rewilding project at NEP Estate in West Sussex. In the text, we can notice storks, nest, oak, and NEP Estate. The word built is a paraphrase version of putting something together from the summary. We know we're in the right place. It seems that the storks built an untidy nest of sticks in the top branches of a huge oak, which is another way of saying putting sticks together high up in a large oak tree. You might have been tempted by the word nest, but the word form wouldn't have worked well as it's in the singular form. See how putting nest together sounds funny in the summary? Be careful of distractors like these. Distractors are answer options that seem like they're correct at first and can be a tempting choice, but ultimately they're wrong. You need to be mindful of these and remember to use those keywords, synonyms, and other clues to help you find the correct answers. And here's the answer. Great job! Let's move on to the next part of the summary to find the answer to number 2. As we read, remember the keywords from the summary: female, 3 eggs, and proved to be. Drone footage taken before the pair started sitting on them showed 3 large eggs. The fact that they were infertile and did not hatch was not too disappointing. The phrase 3 large eggs tells us that we're in the right place. Proved to be in the summary has been paraphrased as the verb were in the text, so it makes sense that the adjective after that, infertile, is the correct answer. Great! The answer to number 2 is the female laid 3 eggs, which unfortunately proved to be infertile. You might have also been tempted by the distractor disappointing, which is another adjective that could have grammatically fit well in the blank. However, this is not the correct answer because infertile is the most accurate. And that's the second question complete. Great job so far. How are you going? Are you finding it tricky to look for synonyms and paraphrase versions of those keywords? Let's keep practicing. Let's read the next part of the summary to look for any keywords that appear in number 3. We're looking for 2 storks, bred, UK, several years, mature, and juveniles. Here's the next part of the text. The pair are only 4 years old, and storks can live to over 30, with their first attempts to breed often failing. Prospects for next year are encouraging. There doesn't seem to be many keywords here other than breed, which is similar to bred. These sentences are talking about the age and lifespan of storks, not about where the storks were bred. Let's keep reading. Here's the next section. These young storks are part of a project to return the species to Britain, inspired by reintroductions in European countries that more than reached their first target. Imported from Poland, they have spent the best part of 3 years in a 6-acre pen with a group of other juveniles and several injured, non-flying adults, also from Poland. Okay, it seems like we're in the right place because the word storks appears. Britain has been paraphrased to UK. 3 years is another way of saying several years. Juveniles is repeated, and adults appears to be another way of saying mature. It seems likely that we're looking for a location with the phrase bred in, so Poland seems like a plausible answer. If we read this for meaning, we can understand that bred was phrased differently in the text as imported from. So the answer to number 3 is indeed Poland. That was a tricky one. Let's move on to the last numbered blank. Question 4. We need to look out for words in the text that correspond to the keywords and phrases of other storks, developing, new home, one left, fly back, and group from number 4. Let's read. Other birds have already shown strong loyalty to the site. 2 years ago, a young bird from Nep flew across the channel to France and this summer returned to its companions. We can see that other birds is another way of saying other storks. Shown is a paraphrase version of developing, and site is a concise version of new home. For the following sentence, we know that the young bird is the one that left Nep, as fly back is another way of saying returned, and companions is paraphrased for group. So we know we're in the right place, and we need to understand what noun goes in the blank. It appears that other storks are developing a sense of what to their new home? In the text, it mentions strong loyalty, but we can only use one word, so loyalty seems like the correct option. Here's the complete summary with the correct answers from the text. And that's it. You just successfully did a summary completion task in IELTS Reading by using E2's method and strategies. How well can you remember the 5-step method? Let's quickly recap it now. First, we need to check for instructions. Then, we read the summary and highlight keywords, followed by scanning the text for the relevant section. Then, we read carefully for meaning so we can finally choose our answer. And if you think you're ready to tackle the IELTS exam, take an E2 IELTS mock test. E2's IELTS mock test simulates test conditions and will provide you with an estimated IELTS score along with additional expert feedback showing you the skills you need to improve. It's available in a range of E2 IELTS test prep courses. And don't forget to practice looking for synonyms or paraphrase versions of those keywords. That's a skill that will come in handy in many IELTS tasks. Thanks for watching. See you next time.